So, Professor, now it's yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so according to my outline, we have covered the census and residency registry, and we have shown that the Chinese government during the Qing dynasty was not able to conduct census, and then they didn't consider Tibetans as subjects of the Qing Empire. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the Amban and the Colonial Office. The lady over here has sort of complained that I haven't given any attention to India. In the Colonial Office section, there will be some mention of India in a very uncomplimenting way. And again, please don't throw tomatoes at me because, again, I'm just translating original documents, okay? So if you are offended by what they say about the Indians, well, please bear with me.
Professor, before you begin, we will not throw tomatoes because tomatoes are really expensive these days.
Okay. I need to switch to another file. How do I do that? I want to switch to another PowerPoint file. There's a mouse over here. Okay, thank you. Wait a minute. It's not. Okay. Okay. Fine. Oh, okay. Good. Thank you. So right now I'm going to. Sorry. Right now I'm going to talk about the Amban. Everybody, is there anybody over here who has not heard the term Amban? Everybody knows what Amban is? You have never heard of Amban. Okay. One of the major justification of used by the PRCs in claiming sovereignty over Tibet is that the PRC tells the Chinese and the world actually, and it's of course in the white paper, the 1992 authoritative white paper, that China has been sending Ambans, which is the governing officer, to Tibet. And so also, not only that, the PRC also tells the world that China, the Qing Empire, and of course the Republic of China also, in the two eras, they had Li Fan Yuan, okay, which are of course given the duties to govern both Mongolia and Tibet. Okay, so the fact that they had what amounts to a governor in Tibet sent by the central administration in Beijing, and also the fact that they have Li Fan Yuan, which is a colonial office, that proves that they have been ruling Tibet. Incidentally, the term colonial office is very, very debatable. The PRC would strongly object to this translation, by the way. They claim something else, and we'll actually see part of the dispute as we go on. But anyway, so this is actually what I said over here. If you look at the white paper, which is the most authoritative statement from the PRC, it says that from 1727, High Commissioners, the Tibetan term is Amban, okay? And in the Western literature, the Western authors call that person the Amban, okay? The PRC uses a different name, calls it High Commissioners. They were stationed in Tibet to supervise local administration on behalf of the central authorities. It's like, you know, the imperial representative, and then blah, 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 and so forth, okay? So altogether, you know, each one will go there for 3 or 4 years, so they have altogether 100. So is that correct, okay? Okay, first of all, you need to understand that, of course, High Commissioner is a translated term. Amban is also, actually, it's a Manchurian word that is used by the Tibetans to refer to this person, but the official Chinese title is Zhu Zhang Da Chen, okay? And what it means, the Zhu means station in, and Zhang means Tibet, and Da Chen means grand officer. So actually what it means is that it is the grand officer, in English it would be the grand officer station in Tibet. And a generic term actually would be Zhu, location at Da Chen, station in blah, 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 Da Chen. And it so happens actually is that this term itself, contrary to what the PRC is trying to tell people, is the other way around. The fact that you have these Zhu Zhang Da Chen proves quite conclusively that Tibet was not part of China. Why? It is because 驻藏大臣 is a standard format for diplomats, for envoys. First of all, you have to know that the Chinese are very particular about having the correct terms. For those of you who know something about Chinese, we always talk about 正名. Okay, 正名 means to make sure they have the right name. And for something as important as this, okay, they would not mix up the names. The officers that are sent, okay, to govern on behalf of the emperor, they are called 总督 governors, okay, senior governors and governors, 巡抚, which is governors or sub-governors, and then they will have something like 道台, they will have something like 首府, and then 知县, 知府, 知州, and all these people, but never like that. But on the other hand, they will have things like station in England Grand Officer. They will have something like station in France Grand Officer. But what is even worse is that they will have something like station in China Grand Officer sent by France and so forth. So what I'll do is that I'll give you these direct quotations, okay, to prove that. There are actually three categories of usage, or the ways that the grand officer stationed in so-and-so that are used. So the first one is that an ambassador sent by the Qing Empire to a foreign country was routinely labeled as grand officer stationed in blah, blah, blah. Okay, so instead of 驻藏大臣, they will have 驻英大臣. So this would be an example, and this is from, of course, Li Hongzhang. Of course, I hope you know who Li Hongzhang is. It's about, it's like Churchill. Okay, so that is in the brief support submitted to the emperor by Li Hongzhang. Okay, and it says over here, proposal to organize Chinese merchants to form companies, blah blah blah, and so forth. This is an official document. It is proposed that China's grand officers stationed in Britain be consulted, blah blah blah. So the usage is actually very formal. It's done by some very influential people. Okay, this is another example, and this is the official document. They then do it by the other way around, and that is the ambassador they're sent by one foreign country to another foreign country, and they will also use this format as country so-and-so, grand officer station in country B. And then you can see this is a quotation, and that is court paper submitted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on suggested regulations of sponsored overseas studies, and they are talking about Thailand over here. Misbehaving Chinese students will be sent home to maintain our respectability. And the example is that, look at what Thailand does. The Prince of Siam is supervised by Thailand's Grand Officer stationed in France. Okay? So, in other words, if you have China sending a diplomat or ambassador, it will be, again, 中国驻英, 中国驻法大使. Over here, talking about Thailand's 驻法大臣, okay? Thailand's 驻法大臣, okay? The third category is the worst category, okay? And that is Qing official documents labeled ambassador that was sent by foreign countries to China, also as grand officer stationed in China. So this will be one example, and that again is in the official regulations and documents that are in this book. And it says over here, China-France meeting, Vietnam border trade, blah, 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 and so forth. Agreed between the two countries that trade locations be open shall be selected jointly by China and the French Grand Officer stationed in China. So, in other words, if China were to say that just because we have sent a Grand Officer stationed in Tibet, therefore Tibet belongs to China, so that would mean that China would belong to France. Okay? Which of course, well, I mean, the Chinese will know that's not true. So, to clarify the matter actually is that during the Qing dynasty, there were two standard terms used for this diplomat. One is 驻藏大臣, 驻法大臣, 驻英大臣, okay? The grand officer stationed in a certain country. But then the other term would be 驻法公使. So actually it's this thing. It's actually 驻法大臣, or it's 驻法公使. 公使 actually it would be, it's a term that is used today, Today, actually, it's used. It's called 大使, but at that time, it's more like 公使. It means the ambassador. Okay, so this is another format, and these are two standard formats. And if you actually go to a database such as Basic Books, and that is, of course, 基本古籍, okay, this is 基本古籍, which is, of course, a database consisting of tens of thousands of the classics, okay, it is Qing Dynasty and before, and this is a database that is, of course, operated by the People's Republic of China, okay. So if you go to a database and search through the tens of thousands of books, and you will see how it's like over here. I will just concentrate on these two columns. There are two standard formats. One is the Amban format, the Tibet format, okay. Grand officer stationed in Tibet, or grand officer stationed in France, or grand station in Britain, or whatever. So that's called 大臣, okay. The other one is called 驻, okay, location, and then it's 公使. And you can see that, for example, for Britain, okay, out of the times when the Chinese ambassador to Britain was being sort of mentioned, 44 times they were named as 驻英大臣, okay, grand officer stationed in Britain, and there were 15 times when the same people were then called or termed as as official envoy station. In other words, it's 驻英公使. Okay, so 驻英. So in Britain, it's 44 versus 15. For Japan, 23 times it says 驻日大臣, and 5 times it says 驻日公使. Okay, and then so forth and so forth. So, but in total of all these ambassadors, 83 times. Okay, you added up 83 times. Those ambassadors that were sent by China to these foreign countries, they were called by this format, and 45 times is called this format. Okay, and then of course, what is even of course worse is that 驻华大臣 appeared 50 times in these classic books. Okay, and that is these are the French ambassadors, the British ambassadors, and the Spanish ambassadors to China, and they were called 驻华大臣. Okay, so in other words, the very fact that China sent, the representative to Tibet and called that person 驻藏大臣, grand officer stationed in Tibet, instead of calling it the 总督, which is the governor, means that the Qing Empire actually knows that, well, they are not allowed, and the Tibet government probably wouldn't allow the Qing Empire to send somebody with the title of governor or general, so it has to conform to this sort of the standard format. Right? And this, of course, was made available or possible by PRC databases. After they have digitized all the book, you can go and use the database and do this statistical analysis. Before that, it would be impossible because I have to look through, tens of thousands of books. Right now, all I have to do is go to the database, search for these terms, and then count the number of hits. Okay? Now, the next aspect is, remember, there's two major justifications. One is that PRC says we sent an amban, okay, a governor, and I've just shown that no, it's not a governor, it's just an envoy, okay, your official title says that. The other argument is that, well, we actually have a Li Fan Yuan. Now this term is rather confusing, particularly those of you who do not know Chinese. The word fan has several meanings. Yesterday, I was talking about Xi Fan. That fan is not the same as this fan, okay? Xi Fan means Tibet. But over here, this is Fan Shu, means a Fan region. It means it's like a protectorate or a foreign land that has some kind of a subordinated relationship with China. Okay, except that, of course, I think I mentioned just now, the Qing Empire referred to even countries like Russia and England as their fan too. Okay, so but anyway, over here, so the argument is that we had an office dedicated to ruling places like Tibet and Mongolia. Now, what I will show with the citations that will come in the subsequent slides, and that is that Fansu actually means colonial possession. In other words, the Li Fan Yuan was China's colonial office, which of course the PRC strongly disagree. Okay? But I'll show that, well, actually, unfortunately, that turns out to be the fact. Which would mean that even if it is true that Tibet was under the rule or the governing of the Li Fan Yuan, that would simply mean that Tibet was a colony of China, which of course is rather embarrassing. Okay? But what is also true, it turns out that Tibet was actually only a wish list colony. China was, Qing Empire, I'm sorry. Qing Empire was really trying to put Tibet under the rule of the colonial office, but without success. So it was actually a wish list colony. It was not even a real colony. Okay, so there are really a two-steps thing that I'm going to show you.
Fan region?
What?
Fan region?
Fan actually, okay, means it's like a subordinate protectorate. It's a Chinese term, and that's the reason why it's under dispute. I am going to show you that they mean it as something like colony. China, I'm sorry, PRC claims that Fan simply means that it's a subordinated region that belongs to China. Okay, and therefore, once you are a Fan, like the Chinese position is that Tibet is one of the Fan Shu, and therefore it's part of China. Okay, but the term is really, you see, that's a problem over here. We have a Chinese term that has Chinese meanings, and they have the English terms, colony. No. Actually, the closest term that I know of is not in English, okay, but actually in German, Mark, M-A-R-K. Remember yesterday I was talking about Denmark? The idea would be very similar. Denmark, the Markland, okay, the Markland, which is like a borderland, which owes some kind of subordinate relationship in the Holy Roman Empire. If those of you who are familiar with European history, you know that there was this the Holy Roman Empire, which is basically a German empire, and then they had all these places in in Denmark, in Sweden, and the Netherlands, which had sort of a very informal kind of a relationship. But otherwise, as I've said, in fact, this is subject to debate as exactly what the meaning is. So, this is very interesting. If you look at the official white paper, this is what they say, okay? And that is, they claim that the Chinese central government established a Bureau of Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs, and this replaces Qing's Li Fan Yuan, a Fan office of handling Fan affairs, for handling Tibetan local affairs. Now, if you look at the entire document, you see something that's very suspicious. And that is, this is the only time the Li Fan Yuan was mentioned in the entire white paper, whereas the Amban argument, the Grand Officer Station in Tibet argument, was brandished 17 times. Now, it shouldn't be like that. The reason is this. If you want to prove your sovereignty over a place like Tibet, okay, the fact that you have a department established to rule it is a more important and more convincing criterion than sending an officer. So if you are using the office argument 17 times, why are you mentioning this Li Fan Yuan only once? Because it actually is a much stronger argument. But then in the other books written by Chinese, then it's used all the time, okay? And it's a major sovereignty argument, okay? So we want to look at that. First of all, again, you can see that the unfortunate fabrications. First of all, the quote that I gave in the previous slide, that is my direct word-for-word translation of the Chinese language version. You will go to the website and look at the English version, okay, of the PRC's document. You see slightly different, okay? It says over here, the Bureau of Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs was established by the central government to replace the Qing dynasty's department in charge of Mongolian and Tibetan affairs. Now, this is what I showed in the previous slide. I'm reproducing it. Okay. The real Chinese word is Li Fan Yuan, okay? And the PRC translates it into the department in charge of Mongolian and Tibetan affairs, which of course means something very different, because this department means that it's in charge of Mongolian Tibetan affairs, and that's not what Li Fan Yuan means, okay? So what does Li Fan Yuan mean, okay? And that's a very embarrassing sort of a question, at least to the PRC, that it's okay. So it's because if you look at the official documents, the Fan, that's to answer your question, it covers something much wider than Mongolia and the Tibetans. For example, if you look at this very authoritative book in Qing history, the Fan regions includes Okinawa, Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines, Afghanistan, blah, 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 and so forth. Again, a whole list, okay? Again, I don't think it includes any of the Indian places, okay? And it's not because they want to ignore you, it's because they just didn't, you probably would not think of that as an insult. They don't call you one of their fund. Okay? Anyway, but it was not included, okay? Moreover, the Department of Foreign Affairs, which is the Li Fan Yuan, was asked to handle all kinds of diplomatic matters with many other foreign countries, including Russia and Britain. For example, if you look at the Qing history draft, there's this record over here, Russia, blah, 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 blah. And then the Foreign Office officially commanded the Russians. They were asked to deal with diplomatic transactions with Russia. And then, of course, according to the record, Russia then sent again tributary envoys. Okay, that's what they claim. Okay, whether the tributary, the Russians certainly don't think of them as tributary envoys, but the Chinese perceived them and recorded them as tributary envoys. And then our emperor, the Qing emperor, then looked at the submission documents and then told their own court ministers that, oh yeah, this Outer Fan region submitting tributes is a great event. Okay, in other words, they referred to Russia as an Outer Fan region that should be handled by the Li Fan Yuan. So Russia was considered as an Outer Fan. Okay, and then of course again it's documented that all the transactions will be handled by the Foreign Office. So it was not a department of Mongolian and Tibetan affairs. This is another example. England, okay, if you look at the Qing history draft, which is the official history of China, then in this section, okay, page 4,517, you have this record. Initially, England's tributary envoy, again, England was named as a tributary country, and the envoy submitted the credentials and documents, and the Foreign Office did not receive them with the correct protocol, okay, and they were punished for that. So the Foreign Office was really asked to, okay, so actually Foreign Office is very much like a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's not sort of a ministry or an office for governing Mongolia or whatever. Now, Foreign Office is a colonial office, okay, which of course the PRC disputes. They think it's an insult. They think it's the sort of an antagonistic attitude of the foreign historians in translating the Foreign Office into colonial office, because the PRC's position is that we don't have a colonial office. We are against colonialism, okay? Colonialism is something that's practiced by the English, by the Americans, by the Spaniards, okay? We have never practiced that. And what I'm trying to show is that, well, actually the Chinese documents themselves actually prove otherwise, okay? The Chinese, they are all for colonialism, okay? And we will see that. So let's look at this book. Again, what's so grand about this book? Okay, why should we even look at this book? Okay, the author Zhang Deyi. Okay, Zhang Deyi is the Emperor Guangxi's English teacher. He was allowed to remain seated next to the emperor while Qing's princes and major officials knelt in front of the emperor during the imperial audiences. He became China's ambassador to Britain in 1902. He coined the Chinese names such as technological items as telegram, bicycle, and screw. He was the first to introduce Chinese readers to the steam engine, elevator, lifts. Okay, this is the American term. Sewing machine, pipe, gas, punctuation marks, and even chocolate. Okay, so I mean, this is some guy who knows what he's talking about. He was a time when China was having contact with the Western nations and was doing the translation. So this guy, how does he translate it? Okay, this one is it. Several days ago, the British chief officer in the Foreign Office, okay, and the Foreign Office is actually the colonial office, okay, Chamberlain. In fact, Chamberlain at that time, in the year of if you go to Wikipedia, you can verify that Chamberlain indeed, in 1903, was the secretary of the colonial office of Britain, okay. So this guy translates the colonial office as the Chinese term Fan Bu, okay, and so it's done by somebody with quite a lot of authority. This is another example. Again, who the heck is this guy? Why should I listen to him? I don't know whether you recognize his name, Aisin-Jero. It's a family surname of the imperial family of the Qing Empire. So the Qing Empire's family surname is Aisin-Jero, okay? So actually, Aisin-Jero Zai Zhen, okay, is the great-great-grandson of Emperor Qianlong. And he was sent to foreign countries several times and active in late Qing governmental reforms. Was Qing Empire's Minister of Commerce. Remember, I said that there are only 6 ministries. So being a ministry, head is pretty senior because there were only 6. So he was the Minister of Commerce and Minister of Industry and Commerce. Okay, so again, it's somebody that, well, he knows, so he should represent, some authority over here. So when he was making up this diary with a mission to Britain, this is what he wrote. Singapore proposed to build a Confucian Academy, submitted to the governor of Singapore to be forwarded to the British Foreign Office again. Okay, so again, the British Foreign Office, which is the office, the colonial office, is routinely translated as "fan," okay, by these Chinese authorities. And so this is another example over here. And then, of course, we have yet another one. Where I'm not going to repeat that. Okay. Just now, what I was showing you was that the colonial office of Britain and the other countries were translated as "fan." Right now, I'm showing something that is related but somewhat different. I'm showing you that "fan" possessions are considered as colonies, or both ways. Okay, colonies equals to "fan." So this is another example. Xie Fucheng is a very famous diplomat at that time during the end of the Qing dynasty, ambassador to UK, France, Italy, and Belgium. And this is the diary of diplomatic missions, okay? And then that's what it says, okay? I'm going to give some attention to India right now, okay? Not in very complimenting terms. Record of the 19th. Britain's own country consists of 3 islands of England, Scotland, Ireland, India, and other foreign possessions, okay? Colonies, foreign possessions. They have a population of 80 plus million, okay? And then, of course, you're talking about Cuba. Cuba was discovered by well, that's what it says, okay? Columbus was Spain, and then they colonized and sent official government. It became foreign possession. Again, the Chinese term is equivalent, is used to represent the colonies over here. Okay, again, India was featured several times over here. Today, India to the east and America to the north are all British foreign, okay? Ying foreign, okay? So these are. And of course, the guy who said that is Yan Fu. And of course, if you know anything about modern Chinese history, this guy is the one who translated The Wealth of Nations, The Theory of Evolution, and then The Spirit of the Laws to China. So these are all sort of the major people who. So this is even more direct, okay? And that is by directly calling Tibet a 殖民地, okay? In Chinese, it's 殖民地. Actually, most Chinese were brought up to really be very antagonistic to the term 殖民地. When they say 殖民地主义, okay, it's like these are evil, okay? Without actually knowing that their near ancestors, maybe the great-grandfather, actually just thought it was very natural, okay? And so over here, you can see that this is, again, primary source document. It's research on Qing Dynasty records, okay? And this is an official report. So, Li Fan Bu, okay, the Fan Office. This humble official notes that the Fan Office was initiated by this dynasty. And then recently, we have a colleague, a Yishi, okay, a Yishi officer, submitted the following. And the facts that's reflected by it is also interesting, okay? The Fan Office was reconstructed into the Fan Ministry. In other words, Li Fan Yuan was reconstructed into Li Fan Bu, okay? And to change the name from Yuan and Bu, okay? Why did we do that? And he was saying that, well, it was changed last year. The original purpose was to emulate the chief colonial officer, 殖民大臣, of the various countries, including England, okay, the Western colonial powers, and the special establishment of the India office. In other words, what they're saying is that we want to do to Tibet exactly what Britain has been doing to India. Okay, it's very clear. India's status within it, it's a colony. It's no escape. I don't think any Indian has any doubt that the British didn't consider you as their brothers or of the same race. Okay, I mean it's a colony. And that's what they're saying. So anyway, by converting an office to a ministry, and this including it among the entities with executive powers. In other words, previously the Li Fan Yuan had no executive powers, but now we are trying to change it with executive powers. Why? It is because we want to enable the Foreign Office to actually manage the various Mongolian banners and Tibet. In other words, in the past, the Fan Yuan was just for ceremonial purposes, handing this so-called tributary envoys, handing them $150,000 and stuff like that. But right now, we went to start managing. So actually, before this was submitted, which is towards the turn of the century, they are admitting that the Li Fan Yuan actually was a ceremonial office without any managing power. Implementing this new structure necessitated the selection of proper talent. And what you see over here is that the Li Fan Yuan, at that time, are only Mongolians and Manchurians, okay? This is very important, and I'll actually show you greater details later on. The Li Fan Yuan, which is the Chinese office for, according to the PRC, to manage or to govern or to rule Mongolia and Manchurians, by the PRC's version, actually they only had Mongolians and Manchurians, no Tibetans and no Hans. Think about it. Why? Well, the Manchurians conquered Mongolia. They don't see why they have to let the Hans to help run the management. It's very much like the British would hire Indians in India to help them to run India. The British would hire Malayans to run Malaya in Malaya, but of course they wouldn't hire Malayans to India to run India, right? Because why should they allow the Malayan people to have the privilege to earn a salary to govern India? In other words, they are willing to share some of the governing duties and some of the governing stipends and salaries with the Indians for India, but not to the non-Indians, okay, who are also the British subjects. This is the same thing over here. They, of course, were Manchurians because they are the conquerors, right? They have Mongolians because this office is primarily a Mongolian office, okay? That's the reason why there's no Tibetans. Because it doesn't govern Tibetan, but it governs Mongolians. Also, why is there no Hans? Well, it's none of your business because, you see, why would want to share the power with the Hans? They conquered the Hans, they conquered the Mongolians, they conquered these places, and they each will be shared by the local people. It's the same thing. It's like the British, sharing Indian governing power with the Indians and sharing Malayan governing powers with the Malays, okay? So over here, I would like to plead to Your Majesty to order the Fan Ministry to break away from old rules, identify personnel with expertise in colonial affairs, 殖民政策, and then to employ them regardless of whether they're children or Hans. What this guy is saying is that give us, the Hans, some jobs at least, give us some vacancies, some job opportunity, okay? So that's what it is. And then, of course, over here, this is a very important person, Zhang Yintang. He was one of the ambans sent to Tibet after the departure of the invading force, the second invading force of Britain. The second British invasion was in 1904, and after they retreated, then this guy was sent. He was one of the very few Hans that was given the position of ambans, because previously all the ambans, they were either Manchurians or they were Mongolians. Okay, they just make sure that the Hans don't even get a chance to not to rule Tibet, but even as an ambassador to Tibet, they didn't give a chance. But this was one of the first Hans. This person is highly esteemed person in PRC's literature. The PRC praises this person as one of the most patriotic and sort of a capable administrator that tried to improve the condition in Tibet, okay? That's a PRC version, okay? So let's see what Zhang Yintang says. Because this is a telegram to the Foreign Ministry on a draft proposal to handle Tibet, okay? Because as I say, he was there 2 years after the British left. He went in and tried to sort of, handle the Tibetan situation, so to speak. We must capture Tibet's governmental control as soon as possible. Train soldiers to develop education. To capture governmental, this is a straight translation. Again, if you feel offended, please don't throw, well, I know you wouldn't throw them because they are expensive, but maybe rotten eggs is cheaper. To capture governmental control, we must grasp the current window of opportunity during which Dalai has yet to return. There was a time when, of course, when the British came, he fled to Mongolia. Okay, so at that time, Dalai Lama left Tibet and went to Mongolia. So in the absence of Dalai, okay, we are going to capture the control, which would mean that it reflects the fact that they had no control, okay? But they want to capture it. So we are going to deploy 100 or so Army Academy graduates, surreptitiously arranged in order to be efficient and effective. Other suggestions are award Dalai and Panchen honorific titles and favorable annual stipends as a system for Indian fan kings. Over here, okay, this armband is really perceiving the Maharajas and the Rajas as equivalent to the fan kings of China. So they are trying to, again, what he's saying is that we have to try to do in Tibet, to do to the Tibetans what the British have been doing to the Indians. Okay? Okay. Emulate is a continuation of the same submission to the imperial court by this armband. Okay, and let's see what he says. Emulate the royal protocol used by the government. Well, because what he's claiming is that the governor of India sent by the British government behaves like the king or the emperor of India, and then of course we should then of course send somebody to Tibet and be the governor of Tibet, which would act like the emperor of Tibet, and to have these Tibetan local officials under them. Okay, so emulate the royal protocol by the governor of India, thus naturally establish the status of the master country. Now, this is actually very important. And again, a lot of people don't realize that because they don't read the original manuscript. For those of you who know something about Chinese, okay, Chinese language is that the mother country or the fatherland, okay, Vaterland, okay, fatherland, mother country, okay, that is in Chinese called 祖国, okay, the mother country. In Chinese documents, Tibet was never considered. I mean, in Chinese documents, the Chinese never sort of suggested that the Tibetans could view China as 祖国, okay, motherland, okay. The term used is always 祖国, okay. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. 祖国 is owner country, master country. Okay, 主人 means that you're the owner of the slave. Okay, it's very different from being a father. This kid. Okay, are you his father or are you his 主人? That's a big difference. Okay, anybody with some basic knowledge of China. So actually, what they're saying is that Britain is the master country. Again, I'm sure the Indians realize that Britain is not your father country, okay? It's not your motherland, okay? And the same thing over here. This armband is saying that we have no intention to be the motherland of the Tibetans, but we want to be the master country of Tibet, okay? It will be difficult to prolong, and this, of course, is just a side issue, but also it's interesting. We'll read that. To prolong the ban against Indian tea imports and the custom revenue, blah, 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 and so forth, the custom duties should be suitably reduced. To resist this trend, we should break with the old thinking, introduce tea seedlings to Tibet. Now, this is actually an interesting part of history. Is that I'm sure all you know about Darjeeling tea and whatever, right? That the British, bought and stole tea seedlings from China, and after that, okay, China actually gave seedlings again in the 1860s, gave seedlings also to Nepal, but they never allowed seedlings to enter Tibet. So the Tibetans never had tea leaves until now when they am I running out of time?
No, I just want to make an intervention for the audience. See, look at the characters in Chinese. 朱国, the one on the left is Chinese characters which you could say are modern Chinese characters since post 1950. The other one, same, 朱国, are traditional Chinese characters. And look at the character for Kuo. You have a square inside which you have something similar to an eye with a line in between and another cross line below, a transverse line. That Kuo means country. So which very many ways tells you symbolically that a country is a square and all of us have to be inside that square. Which tells you that psychologically, historically, culturally, the state has been a protector and also a controller of individuals. I leave it here.
Okay, is that all? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, let's see a continuation of that. If the Tibetans feel offended, don't blame me, okay? The Tibetan region covers 3,000 miles in both directions. The mineral deposits are unrivaled throughout the 5 continents. In future, it will definitely be our excellent colony. Okay, and this statement implies 2 things. Is that number one, at that time it wasn't a colony yet. Okay, but the purpose or the what you might call the destiny of Tibet, okay, is that if the Qing government were to be successful, then the destiny of Tibet would be a colony. It could be an excellent colony. And then, of course, why does the Qing Empire want Tibet to be the colony? Is not because of any brotherly love or the fact that there was a common cultural background. It's never mentioned. Nothing about culture, nothing about ethnic affinity. It's because if it's managed by the right people, the benefits will double in 10 years. Our annual commercial profit will exceed tens of millions. Okay? And this, of course, is an official report to the emperor by this Amban, which is considered as the most capable and the best Amban by the current PRC government. Okay? If you go to Dushu, if you go to Wikipedia, or if you go to Baidu, okay, the Chinese website, you search for Zhang Yingtang, okay, you see all these phrases by this guy. Okay, so that's his position. This is another one. Okay, this is 1907 December. If I go back, the preceding one was in February, the 2nd month, right? This is 2nd month, okay? 1907, 2nd month. And then after a few months, the Amban sends in another report. And so further elaborations on his earlier proposal. Tibet is vast but sparsely populated, rich in minerals. And so it's ripe for whatever, okay? Ripe for unification. Okay? So in future, it would be exploited as a colony. The grand officer stationed in Tibet, the Amban, has never taken. Now, this is by the current Amban writing a report to the emperor of a situation. Okay, so what he is saying is that in the past, the other Ambans, in other words, my predecessors, my preceding colleagues, has never taken care of governmental affairs and has long been despised by the Tibetans. He has no military support to suppress and appease and is unable to participate in any government matters. The British ridicule us for having no sovereignty in Tibet and for our failure to fulfill the obligations of a master nation. We indeed should feel ashamed. Okay? And that's what he says. And then, of course, as I've said, please don't feel offended. As for the likelihood that the Tibetan authorities will resist if we take over the government, this official humbly feels that the Tibetans are poor, weak, and stupid. At present, they have no ability to resist. Even if there were minor disturbances, 3,000 trained soldiers will be enough to suppress or placate them. Basically, he's asking the emperor, give me the money. I'm going to get in 3,000 soldiers from Sichuan, and then I'm going to take care of the Tibetans. Note that the British, okay, again, India it's going to be featured several times in this section, okay. Note that the British rule India by respecting the tradition and have the Indian people ruled by the indigenous kings who are in turn controlled. But now, whether it's true or not is again, I'm not trying to defend this, okay? This is the perception of the Amban, and the Amban is reporting to the emperor, okay? Who are in turn controlled by the government of India. Indians are used as low-ranking soldiers, but controlled and trained by the British officers. Everybody submits and remains docile. The way China governs Tibet must be like the way Britain governs India. Continue. His submission continues, okay? So, he says, the following draft proposed actions are modeled after the British India system. So this humble official hereby respectfully submits them for the view of your majesty. Number 1, establish the office of the Grand Executive Minister of Tibet to reflect blah, 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 and so forth. Note that the British governor of India adopts the royal protocol to control the Indian indigenous rajas, okay, kings, okay? For 100 years, now this again is interesting because if you remember, this is 1907, and it says for 100 years the Amban has lost its governing power. So even this particular Amban in 1907 acknowledges that for the 100 years they have lost the governing powers, implying that there was some time before that they had some power. But remember, the Qing official history already stated that the Qing Empire didn't even have, according to their claim, their own claim, they didn't have any power until 1792. Okay? So if you count backwards from 1907, for 100 years is 1807. In other words, they stopped having power in 1807, but it started having power in 1792, according to their claim. That would mean that even to their own claim, they only had power for 15 years, okay? But that's still according to their own claim, okay? They only had for 15 years. Anyway,